Hello everyone, I'm Lilith and today I'll be talking to you about patch 5.3 as a discipline priest. So a few things have changed since the old 5.1 and 5.2 that we all dearly loved. Yeah. Alright, so just for reference sake, I'm making this video because I know I haven't put one out since patch 5.1 for the Discipline Priest. I also did a Holy Guide, and I'm going to be doing one of those as well, but we'll talk about that later. So 5.3, right, it came out, and there's been some Discipline Priest changes, obviously, yeah. So first, let's just go over the main changes if you are playing a Discipline Priest this patch. First of all, the Glyph of Smite will no longer cause the additional 20% damage that is increased by your Smite spell to transfer into Atonement, meaning that that glyph will be completely obsolete. Secondly, Glyph of Mass Dispel has been redesigned and it will no longer reduce the cast time of the spell, but the glyph now enables it to dispel magic effects that are normally undispellable. Atonement. Atonement did get a nerf from 100% of the direct healing, 100% of the direct damage that you do into healing from your Smite, Penance, and Solace. It is now 90% instead of 100%. And also, Borrowed Time got a big nerf, which was kind of significant, but it wasn't that bad because you know, we were using it for some things as a discipline that we probably shouldn't be using it for, such as using it for renews, especially in battlegrounds and things like that. But if you're playing PvE, it obviously doesn't matter, right? So I mean, why is that such a big deal? It's really controversial at the moment, but I haven't seen too much of a difference in the effect itself. Now, the last big change, if you are playing a Discipline Priest this patch, is Penance will now do 10% less damage. That's right, Penance got nerfed. It got nerfed. It did. However, the thing is, it's not that significant because even though it's a flat 20% healing nerf to your Penance because Atonement's 10% less and then your Penance is 10% less, you're still going to be making that up through your evangelism stacks if you're not using your Archangel on cooldown, you know? So it's not that big of a deal, but it's still a good thing. You know, it's something that was definitely needed, I think, for the Discipline Priest because it was very, very overpowered in the past patches. Anyway, so you may have a few questions, right? So patch 5.3 hit and you're like, well, how do these changes affect me? You know, what should I be doing? How does this affect me? Well, I want to say firstly that if you did play a healing priest before, you know, back in vanilla, back before things like Atonement, then you'll know that Atonement does not equal regular healing, obviously, because, you know, while Atonement is definitely a good thing that they added to the game, it was necessary to make the priests, you know, more fun. I think that, you know, now we're not going to be seeing as much Atonement healing, even though we will, because Atonement healing, even if it got nerfed by 10%, it does not change how strong the spell is. You know, Atonement is very, very, very strong in a good portion of the situations that we're going to be using it in, and it's going to be our primary filler spell when there's nothing else to heal, and even during large AoE healing situations, we'll be using offensive penances in order to heal the raid on top of everything else that we should be doing. So with the nerf, it's going to be more important, I think, to be using it on the tanks. Now, this is something that is controversial, and I have talked to a few other Discipline Priests about this, and some of them say it's not even worth putting Grace on the tanks anymore because they just think that it's not going to be worth it because they have other people to do it, and they think it's going to be more useful to use it offensively 100% of the time rather than get the grace stack up on your tank. Now, my opinion on this is that if we run into a fight like Council of Elders, like Hordon, like Dark Animus, where the tank is going to be taking a decent amount of damage, we're going to want to keep all 3 of our grace stacks up on the tank, because we're going to be healing him a decent amount because of the damage that he will be taking. So I think that it is going to still be very important, and I think it is very important still, that we keep the grace up on the tanks. A lot of this is going to be your play style, but it is still my personal opinion, and I do still keep grace up on the tanks because it's too strong to pass up on fights that your tanks are going to need the extra healing. Now, the next question. Since Glyph of Smite is almost useless now, which glyph should I choose in lieu of it? Well, this is where it's going to get a little different because we're not used to changing glyphs. So let's open up our glyphs here. So right now, this is what I'm rolling with, okay? I'm rolling with the Glyph of Penance, which obviously increases the mana cost of Penance by 20%, but we're now able to cast it while using, which is obviously very, very useful in a ton of situations, and I've used it on every fight this tier. The next one is going to be Glyph of Inner Sanctum, which is going to be interchangeable with the Glyph of Inner Fire. Now, Glyph of Inner Sanctum will reduce all the spell damage you take by 6% and will increase your movement speed if you have Inner Will on. So basically, for fights without spell damage, we'll be wanting to use the Glyph of Inner Fire, which increases our armor from Inner Fire by 50%. But most of the fights this tier do have spell damage, so I use it for almost every fight. And the third one is going to be your Glyph of Fade. Now, it does get controversial here because some people say they would rather use, let's find it if we can, they would rather use the Glyph of Prayer of Mending, which I don't agree with. There are a couple of fights where this glyph would be very useful. Again, the tank intense heavy healing fight, you know, Dark Animus, Hordon, Council, you know, Frost King, Malak, those kinds of things where we would want to use and get the extra amount of healing. But in a 25-man raid, I just do not see this glyph being as useful as having every 45 seconds a 10% damage reduction on yourself. That is very big. That is very, very, very big. You know, in fact, there's so many situations. You know, Megara, every 45 seconds, you use it on Rampage. Dark Animus, you use it for every interrupting jolt, or every other interrupting jolt, rather. You know, there's so many applications to this glyph and this damage reduction that it is going to be very useful to have. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit down to the item upgrades section, right? So item upgrades came again in patch 5.3. They were here in patch 5.1, but they removed them in patch 5.2, and they're back. So here's the order that a lot of the priests over at How to Priest have been talking about, and I agree with them strongly. I'll tell you why in a minute, but basically, I'm going to give you the top 5. So number 1 is your main hand weapon, or your staff. Number 2 will be any of your healing 535 heroic or above trinkets, and then next will be your chest piece, followed by your pants, and then your helmet. Now, why do we want to choose those? I'll tell you why. Main hand. What does it have that none of our other pieces of gear have? None of them have it. It's spell power. Right. Now, it also has a good amount of intellect and spell power. So it's very, very good to upgrade this weapon first. As you see, I've got my best in slot dagger. I've upgraded it twice. Based on the stat priorities I've chosen, and we'll talk about those in a moment, but this is what I've chosen right here. So of course we have our weapon, and then we're going to be upgrading trinkets. My trinkets are jack shit. I do not like them at all. You know, Heroic Inscribed Back of Hydra Spawn does nothing. You know, it's a fraction of healing on almost any given fight. And then the Soothing Talisman, I just did not see it worth upgrading because it's a 522, and there's a good chance I'll be able to replace that. And then our chest piece. Our chest piece, and then I believe it, yeah, pants, and then our helmet. Keep in mind, when we upgrade a piece of gear, it does not increase how much you're getting from the socket bonuses or your gems, but it does increase the proc rates, and how much the procs are procking for on your trinkets. That's why it is very, very good if you have a heroic Thunderforged Hordon's Grasp that you upgrade that thing as quickly as you can twice. That will be amazing. You will be unstoppable. Okay, so that's item upgrades. Now let's go into talents a little bit, because I know they're a little bit different than patch 5.1, but I do want to talk about it. So first tier doesn't matter, like always. I'm not going to go into details on those. Second tier, again, it doesn't matter. However, the only fight I really don't like body and soul on is Darumu, because people will get mad at you if you power word shield them when they're kiting, red, or they're kiting anything. If they're just running around in it and the person that's kiting it gets a speed boost, everybody else is going to be trying to catch up as fast as they can, and it's going to be insanely difficult for them to actually do that. Now, this one I was doing challenge mode, so I didn't switch it back, but the best one is still going to be Soul Ascend Insanity. And then your fourth tier, you'll be using Desperate Prayer, and then Power Infusion still. And I have found, though, that for the level 90 talents, I like Divine Star a lot. I'm using Cascade here because we were doing Heroic Dark Animus progression, and we did kill it, and it's very strong burst healing if you Archangel and use Cascade. And then again, I was doing challenge mode carries, and I forgot to spec out of that. But Divine Star is very useful on almost every fight this tier. I can use it. It's strong. It's a very strong spell, because almost every fight you're going to be stacking at some point to heal the raid. And you've got to be thinking about these things, right? If you want to be a good healer or a good raider, you have to think before you go in there. When will I be using this? Will I be using this? Will the raid be stacked? Will the raid be spread? What is going to get me the most amount of throughput where I need it? That is where that comes into play. You can't think what's going to give me the most HPS, because then we'd just be like, oh, Halo lol. You need to think what is going to keep my raid alive, because in the end, that is what matters. I see a lot of these priests and healers in general who just say HPS is the only thing that matters. Yeah, that is completely wrong, because you work synergetically with every other healer you heal with. Doesn't matter how many healers, doesn't matter what class, you're healing synergetically with them. They could be sniping you, it doesn't matter. The thing is, if you're all around the same healing, and you go through your logs and you're doing everything right, you're using your cooldowns where you should be, you're healing, your spell priorities are good. If you go through your logs and see X took X amount of damage and you use the right spell to heal them up, bravo, you're doing your job. I don't like people saying, oh, well, I'm getting beat by the Resto Shaman on Heroic Megara. Yeah, that is, it's very sad. You need to know how your other healers are going to work and what their mechanics are. Which is why I would recommend, if you're going to be making an alt, make another healer alt if you're a healer, because it helps you figure out how to be synergetic with your other healers. I currently, besides this Disc Priest, have a Resto Druid, I have a Mistweaver Monk, and a Holy Paladin. I haven't touched my Shaman yet, but I at least know how the class works. So now that I've played almost every healer, because they've all cleared Throne of Thunder at this point, I know what I can count on. If I see somebody take damage, I can know who's going to be healing that person before I can, and just not waste it. Because the worst thing you want to do, guys, is if one person in the raid dips to 50% and you have all 6 healers cast a spell on them. You're wasting your fucking time, you're wasting your mana. Just no. That is why you need to work around with your healers. Okay, so basically that's talents. So let's go into stat priorities. Now, stat priorities have changed since the legendary meta gem has become more widespread available. Now, if you don't know what the legendary meta gem is, basically for 4 seconds, it's 4 seconds, right? Yeah, 4 seconds, you get free heals. Doesn't cost a thing. Nope. Nothing. Do you know how amazing that is if you're doing Heroic Tortoise and you can pop Archangel with the LMG proc and then hit Halo? Pretty fucking OP. So, with the legendary meta gem, this now means that we're able to drop a ton of spirit. Well, you may be asking me, Lilith, why would you drop so much spirit and risk all of that for your rapture? Because you're not going to need it. If you have this legendary meta gem and you're not gemming like I'm about to tell you, try it. If it doesn't work for you, fine. But if it does, you're going to thank me because it is the way to go. Okay, so above all, right, our top priority is going to be intellect, obviously. So you can see I'm buffed right now. I've got 24,153 in. Followed by spirit, which I'll go over more in a minute with gemming and things. And then, this is important, crit. Our crit needs to be at least 2% over our mastery, in my opinion, because I've gone through logs, I've read lots of things, you know, I've theory crafted about it enough, I've done the math. It needs to be at least 2% over your mastery for it to really rock. Now, people may be saying, well, the LMG's out, I'm getting free spells and I'll be using bubbles, so why don't I just use mastery? The thing is, it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. Mastery and crit right now are within about 2 to 3% healing of each other, which is why it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, 2 to 3% healing is nothing. You know, 2% healing of 100,000 is what? 2,000. 2,000. I mean, if you're struggling with the fight, yeah, sure, but it doesn't matter, because if you're going mastery, you have to be such an obscene amount of mastery compared to your crit that it's going to be difficult to reach unless you have a decent amount of gear. Because let's say you're at like 35% mastery, for that to be even optimal or viable, you need to have only 12% crit or so. Otherwise, it is going to be a loss. It is. And I don't have time to explain it here in this video, but I'm sure in one of the many videos I'll be doing, I will talk about that. So moving on to gemming, I'm not really going to go over enchanting, you know, just basically, I mean, gloves, 170 mastery, and then everything else is pretty straightforward. If you need to look it up, you can go to the forums. I'm sure there's a nice little Discipline Priest guide up there, but pretty much glorious stats chest basically, and then I use superior mastery on my gloves. Now gemming. Here's what you're gonna want to do. If you have the LMG, LMG equals legendary meta gem. If you have the legendary meta gem, your blue sockets should be purified. That means they need to have 80 intellect and 160 spirit in them. Your red sockets will have pure intellect, 160 intellect. Obviously, I'm a jewel crafter. I get a 320. Well, I get two 320s. And then for your yellows and your oranges, you will be using the, I believe it's called Potent. Let me see if I'm correct. Yep, Potent Vermilion Onyx, 80 intellect, 160 crit. And then after that, basically your prismatic sockets here, you have one on your weapon, or you should. You will be getting the intellect again, and as well as on the belt, I use the intellect for my prismatic socket. So what's the reason behind this? Because if we're gemming like it's patch 5.1 all over again, and we're still going for spirit, right? So we're doing heroic stone guards at 469 item level or somewhere thereabouts. The first week heroics are available. How much spirit are we at? If you can remember back that far, priests could barely hit 11, maybe 12,000 if they had a lot of spirit. You know, that would be considered very good at that point. So why not do it now? Because if we have this free heals for 4 seconds, which it procs a very, very good amount of the time, you're going to want to drop a bunch of spirit for intellect. Now, the easiest way to drop all of that spirit, obviously through your gymming, and then after that, if you're a tailor, use your light weave embroidery, things like that, because you're going to want to drop a lot of spirit. Right now, I'm at 11,963 spirit, and I eat 300 in food, and I flask for intellect. So at the end of the day, raid buffed, food buffed, I'm at about 26,000 intellect in a raid. Intellect also increases the amount of critical strike we have, which is very good. So basically, the new healing style for Discipline Priest is going to be different. It is. It's not going to be that much different because it's not that big of a nerf, but it's still going to be different from what we were doing originally in patch 5.2, the beginning of 5.2, I should say. So before we move on to the gameplay of the Discipline Priest, let's go over a few of the basic things for you Discipline Priest out there who are just getting started. I'm going to go over some of the passive abilities that in Mist of Pandaria did go passive. They used to be in the talent trees. Obviously, the talent trees have been changed and things like that. So some of the more important ones, train of thought. So if you're greater healing, inner focus is reduced by 5 seconds. The cooldown of that. This doesn't apply to a lot of people because honestly, I don't cast greater heal that much. It's just not worth it because the cost of greater heal equals the cost of flash heal at the moment, which is stupid. So, take that for what you will. And then obviously Rapture. So let's read this off for you guys. Removes the cooldown on Power Word Shield and reduces its mana cost by 25%. In addition, when it is completely absorbed, you are energized with 150% of your mana, so equal to your spirit, 150% of your spirit, translated into mana, on a 12-second CD. This is probably the niche of the Discipline Priest and the most important part, especially if you're going to be gymming intellect. You want to be utilizing Rapture as much as you can. How do you track this? I use weak auras. I'm sure just go Google weak auras for Rapture timer, or you can go download the add-on Angela's Rapture Tracker. I'll put that down in the information below the video, and you can go download that if you want to. Every time your Rapture's off of cooldown, you need to be using a Power Word Shield on the tank if you can. And if you have 2 Disc Priest, use it on somebody that if there's predictable damage coming up, like let's say Lingering Gaze is coming on Darumu, I'm going to Power Word Shield somebody if there's already a shield on the tank who has the Lingering Gaze. They will absorb it. I'll get my mana. Things like that, That is how you play. I mean, to be the best, it sounds really cheesy. To be a very advanced Discipline Priest, and especially a healer, like I said before, you need to not only prepare for the damage that's coming, because this isn't something that just healers have to do. The entire raid, to be a very, very good raider, you need to be able to think at least 15 seconds ahead of what's coming. So you think, what's coming in 15 seconds that I may need to move for, or that I may need to prevent my own damage coming, that I may need to health stone for, the tank might need a CD. What can you do to dampen all of that and become the best raider that you can possibly be? And basically, in the end of the day, that is what makes you a very good raider. So moving on, obviously Mystician intellect by 5%. I mean, there really aren't any more that are very important. Obviously Grace increases the healing that the tank is going to be taking per stack, and that's about that as far as that. So I'm going to be doing a gameplay of the Discipline Priest so that I can give you guys a little look into how the Discipline Priest is working for 5.3 and how I'm changing my healing according to it. So I know I haven't put out a video in a while, like I said before, but I'm definitely going to be putting out a lot more videos coming soon. So if you like this video, comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll be back in a minute, guys. Thanks.
Summit, U.S. Illidan.